one of the biggest manufacturing company, that is GlaxoSmithKline, that manufactures pharmaceutical products, said they are exiting Nigeria. So I want to look at the environment of doing business in Nigeria. Is it friendly as at today with our inflation rate soaring high, the GDP is going down, everything seems to be going down? So with me this morning in the studio is Dr. Usaze Iyoha, an economist, someone who is very groomed in economics, who knows the system of economics, how everything works. He was with me here some weeks ago talking about when the CBN increased their interest rate from 18.5 to 18.75%. It was here with me to talk about it. Here is with me again this morning, joining me this morning to talk about the ease of doing business. How is the environment like? Good morning, Dr. Yoha.
Good morning, Chief.
Good to have you again.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime you're always here, it's something super for me.
Thank you. Thank you, Via. Good morning. Yeah.
All right. So this morning, let's look at our environment of business.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago, one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies, that's GlaxoSmithKline, said they are exiting. This is not the first time we're seeing big companies exit Nigeria. A lot have gone, and there's possibilities that some will still go. What should be done for us to keep these big guys here? Our GDP is going down on a daily basis. The inflation rate is going higher on a daily basis. What can we really do as a nation? What can the government do?
Yeah, it's simple. I think it's all about sincerity, basically, because we've done so many economic theories, we've tried to theorize, and that's why most people have said, economists have almost become like enemies to Nigerians now, because they think we just...
people like you.
They think we just theorize, we just use too much theory, and it's not reflecting in the real sector, and you really cannot blame people, because I know I was reading a WhatsApp chat yesterday on a group, and it was showing Nigeria's GDP, and it said Nigeria has the highest GDP in Africa, Nigeria is the largest economy in Africa. Then somebody was like, oh, this one's nonsense. It's not, people are still poor, it's not reflecting, and you can't blame them. That's the truth, because you talk of GDP, that's just nominal. When you now bring GDP per capita, you now see that Nigeria is ranking somewhere around 19, 20 in Africa. Meanwhile, when it comes to the nominal GDP, it's ranking very high, the first in the world. It's the first in Africa, and that's simply because of population. GDP is a reflection of population. GDP is a computation of how much goods and services are produced in an economy at a particular time. So since you have many people in the country, 200 million people, so you expect that goods will be, there will be a lot of production. But when you now say per capita, divide that large GDP by 200 million people, you see that you have this one. So it just has nothing to do with it's the business environment, as you said. And we can there was just, I was reading an article, and I was reading about, I think it was about 400 companies that have left in the last 15 years that have left Nigeria, about 400. And is it Dunlop, is it Michelin? Yeah. These companies Dunlop was in Port Harcourt, Michelin was in Lagos. They were producing tires, I remember then as a child, you see, I was staying somewhere around Ego, when this lob is passing, people are closing their nose, you see the smell. So it was coming in torrents, but now you don't see them, because there's nobody using, they didn't go far, they're in Ghana here. I have my relations are in Ghana, they're in Ghana there, and this is still their largest market. They are still pouring in their products here. We are still their largest market, but just because of the unfriendly environment, they're in a country, Ghana, and so just our neighbors here, Niger Republic, and so on that we give. They have 24 hours light. In Ghana, in fact, before they cease light in the next 3 days, they've given a notice.
A notification.
My sister has sent me so many times when you see notice that and even at that they will say 5-6 hours. Sometimes you say by 15 minutes they've restored it. So when you have that kind of cheap product, because you cannot compete. We just talked about ShopRite. I talked about it last time, and they had to leave. And on their reports when they were, they said 60% of their operating costs is power. They are spending it on power, diesel. You can imagine, I was going through a bank yesterday. I was in the bank for like 3 hours, and throughout the generator, the plant was on. So you can imagine running on diesel.
That's actually a small time.
I'm telling you, that's
from morning to the shutdown.
Exactly. So that's just the period I was talking to the CMD of one of the federal hospitals. He was giving a report on it, and he was saying that as at last month, that they saw that they used an average of 1.4 million for diesel just a day 1.4 million.
A day.
Just a day.
Not in a week, not
A
in a
day.
month.
And you've not talked about cost of maintenance of these generators, of these plants, and so on. The parts are not available. You have to import it. So those are the factors. It's mainly fiscal, and that's why the last time when we talked about increasing interest rate the last time, I was like, it doesn't. You can increase interest rate. Increasing the interest rate per se is not what will bring down inflation. It's what effect does this interest rate increase have? That's what you look at. It's not the interest rate per se. Is the effect, and that's why I talked about the Keynesians. Then they said increase interest rate. The essence is that it reduces demand. Yeah, but Nigeria is a peculiar economy. We've said it so many times that Nigeria's economy is largely, on theory, in our textbook, they say it's 40% informal and 60% formal. But I can tell you that it's even probably 80-20 or even 70-30. And that's why you see America and Canada, after the COVID, Canada's inflation was around 10.8%. America, I remember we were watching CNN then, their inflation was, there was a time they said it was 41-year high. It was about 10.9. But today, America's population is just about 2%. Canada's is just about 3 to 4%. Why? Because these are formal sectors. So they kept increasing interest rates just like us. Canada has increased 8 times back to back. But because it's a formal economy, so that's why this increase will have an effect. So if we say Nigeria is an informal, you have a large informal sector. So when you're increasing interest, what's the effect? The thought is that when you increase interest rates, the banks, their rates is increased. So you who is a producer, investor, I want to borrow from the bank. I used to borrow at 10% before, but now they are telling me it's 25%. So it means I can't borrow. Or if I was to borrow 100 million, I cut down to 20 million. So it means it affects my output. I'm not able to produce enough. Then I'll probably lay off workers or reduce their salary. So what has that done? It has reduced demand. So that person who I reduced his salary to 50,000 from 100,000, he used to buy 2 loaves of bread before, he now can buy just 1. Then the output of the producer himself has reduced. Why? Just because you increased interest rates. So demand from everybody. This person who you have reduced his salary, that used to give his brother allowance of 10K before a week, he has reduced it to 5K. That one's demand has also reduced. The other sense is that it now converges towards supply. That because demand is higher than supply that the price is increased, so it converges. But when you're now, that's a formal sector because the bank has had an effect on the people. But when you have a sector that is largely informal, which is where Nigeria is 60-70%, how many companies, I can say in the entire New Benin, as big as New Benin market is, I'm not so sure that you would have up to 10 or 20 shops that are registered with CAC. Most of them are just, exactly. So if you have to go to a bank to borrow, you have to, you have to bring it, in fact, you have to verify everything, all your documents, tax clearance, exactly, tax clearance for the last 3 months. So it means that those people cannot use the bank.
True.
They use informal sector, the cooperatives, the OIDA, and so on. So it means that when you are increasing interest rate, it's not having an impact. Because how many people are using, so the informal sector is large. So that's why you can increase interest rate for God knows when in an economy like Nigeria. Inflation will not be affected because you have a large informal sector. So that's why I just gave that back to show you that the business environment is not monetary driven. So no matter what you talk about CNN, about theory, so that's why I gave the background first that economics in Nigeria almost heterogeneous because we do theory. The theory of increasing interest rate, which I explained, is that it will reduce demand. But when you're in an economy that is largely informal, so no matter the theory we give, it won't have an effect. So that's why we go to fiscal. And that's why you have monetary policy and fiscal. Fiscal is the government sector. What's government doing? We talked about light. That's a very serious determinant of the business environment that they are facing. You talk about insecurity. You talk about customs. We've talked about this so many times. Custom, you bring a container, there are scanners. They are called scanners. If a container is as large as 400 feet, it can be goggled. The scanner will scan it in just about 45 minutes. Scanner, no matter how large it is, it just scans it. Then you see everything that is on the monitor. It will just be presented to you. You see card, whatever, to as small as a pin, you see it. But so far, CBN, since the 80s, since Obasanjo's time, President Obasanjo, they've been voting money for scanners. Jonathan, in fact, CBN under Emefiele voted money for scanners. They keep buying scanners and they are not working. So why? Because people want to manipulate. They prefer the manual one where you bring out you go one by one. You want it means to empty 400 feet. Why? So that you can do deals. You tell a producer, you tell, okay, see your bill is about 5 million naira. So I will do it. Okay, you bring 3 million naira. Then 1.5 number, 1 is the government. So you do all those deals. So government, so, but if it's computerized, there's no how, you put it on the monitor, the manager is seeing it, everybody is seeing it in the office, so you can't do those deals. And that you are doing that at the sacrifice of Nigeria because it's wasting time. So that's why you see importers bring out cars. You talk to all these traders, they tell you 1 month, his goods are still at the port. But you go to Ghana, most of them have gone to Ghana. Benin Republic, 24 hours is cleared. So, and each day spending there is getting demurrage. There's demurrage of thousands on it. So they come and they add it to their price. So all these ones are discouraging factors. Or even registration of companies. I was also doing research. You see that in some countries, Switzerland, Qatar, US, their average time to get your company registered is 14 days, 15 days. The longest I've seen is China, about 25 days. You can't do it here. If I to ordinarily get a CAC, you will walk around the whole country. In fact, somebody can just, your paper might just be in somebody's drawer, and he will tell you that we are processing because you've not come to see them 1 or 2. You do IT, and the process is long. If you've talked to, I interface, I work in a place where I deal with contractors. You need about 16, 17 documents to be able to either bid or do any government contracts. You need to do ITF, you need to do NSITF, you need to do CAC, tax clearance, PENCOM. There are so many, there is a gamut of processes.
Like very cumbersome process.
Cumbersome. Then when you do all that, you now come in an environment that there's no power, an environment that there's no, that there's insecurity, multi-tax. You talk to producer, they say federal tax people come today, you settle them. In the afternoon, state workers will now come. In the evening, local government will now come. Then the street people will now come. So you settle as much people as that. Then the tax is not so easy. If you follow the Finance Act that was signed by the government in January, education tax was increased from 2.5 to 3%. It had just been increased from 2% last year. So CIT, which is the company income tax, is 30%. Education tax, 3%. There was a recent 0.5% tax that was added just this Finance Act for if you are importing goods from outside Africa, you pay 5%. You know, so there's a gamut of taxes. So on the average, you are paying about 36% tax as a company in Nigeria. It's the highest or one of the 3 highest in the world. So you are facing all this tax, and you have to provide your power. You have to grade your roads. There's insecurity. So those are the issues that have led to a very harsh business environment. And you know, you are not getting in, those are the sources of where you get your tax as a country. And that's why our GDP to tax ratio is very low. Till tomorrow is one of the lowest in the world, because these companies are the people who are supposed to pay tax. And they are leaving the economy. It also will affect production, it will affect employment and so on. So it's largely fiscal. Government, I think they know what to do. You don't need an economist to know all these things. And most of them even have very intelligent economists who they take in their backroom staff, their pressmen and their PAs. So I think it just has to do with sincerity of the government. There has to be a patriotic and sincere approach to running government. That's my take, really.
Wow.
Yeah.
This has been something very... The other questions I would have asked, you've already answered them. Like, you embedded them into everything you just said. Yeah. So because of time, I wouldn't want to ask you much questions because I need to let you go attend to 1 or 2 other things. I really want to thank you for coming on the show this morning.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure having you. Thank you very much.